I woke up that morning feeling unusually optimistic. Not like today's gonna be great. Optimistic, but the dangerous kind of optimistic where you actually believe you can adult for a full day without setting something on fire, financially or literally. I didn't announce it to anyone. That's important. If you announce that you're gonna be responsible, responsibility assumes you're already an expert. I was never an expert. I'm basically a trial version of an adult, and that's how I operate 99% of the time. I started small. Now, I've seen adults make beds, and it looks effortless. But when I do it, it's like folding a fitted sheet blindfolded while balancing a coffee cup. I stepped back and stared at it, waiting for something, an acknowledgement, applause, maybe a certificate. Nothing happened. That's when I realized adulting doesn't reward you immediately. It's a long con. You do something right and the universe just silently files it away under things you survived. Next, I decided to go grocery shopping like a responsible human being. That's where things started to spiral. I had a list, I had a plan, wore sensible shoes. I thought that if I looked the part, it would help. The store was quiet, calm, and the employees were, of course, perfect at their jobs. Calm people are terrifying when you're not calm. I grabbed a cart, not because I needed it, but because I wanted to signal competence. Then I spent 10 minutes deciding whether to buy organic or regular bananas, staring at them like they were ancient artifacts with the power to judge me. By the time I reached the checkout line, felt like a seasoned adult. Then the cashier smiled politely and asked, "Did you find everything okay?" I panicked internally for approximately 23 seconds. That's the exact moment responsibility left the room and left me alone with my conscience. I said, "Yes," but it came out like I was making a confession. She nodded, calm as ever, and I realized she didn't care. That's the cruel trick of adulting people. Are calm, life moves forward, and they leave you to question everything you just did. I thought I was making progress. I had survived making decisions, interacting with strangers, and not breaking anything yet. That confidence was dangerous. I decided to tackle one more task, something truly grown, paperwork. Just one form, one tiny piece of paper that could hypothetically change something in my life. I opened it and immediately got lost in the fine print. Every word seemed to mock me. I nodded as if I understood. My brain was waving a red flag like, "You do not belong here." By the afternoon, I was exhausted, not physically, but mentally. Every choice, every interaction, every small success piled up like invisible weights. Responsibility doesn't give you trophies, it gives you awareness, and awareness is heavy. I tried to relax. Relaxing felt like a task. Sitting down required calculation. Was this productive sitting? Was it strategic decompression? I realized responsible people are constantly performing, internally and externally. If you stop, even for a second, consequences are quietly lining up, watching, waiting. Went to make a cup of coffee as a final adult gesture, thinking, this is the part where I finish strong. But I misjudged the coffee grounds, the water level, and the timing. Nothing exploded, nothing caught fire, but the result was a sad little cup of brown water that somehow tasted like defeat. I sipped it solemnly, reflecting that even small tasks are full of unexpected pitfalls. Adulting is not heroic. It is a slow, quiet trial of patience, judgment, and the realization that nothing ever really ends the way you expect. By evening, I sat on the couch, staring at the day like a survivor recounting a war story. I hadn't failed spectacularly, but I hadn't succeeded either. I realized that maybe the point wasn't to succeed. Maybe it was just to try, to stumble, to realize that being responsible is a series of small missteps that somehow feel enormous, and that laughing at yourself is the only way to survive it. That's when I knew tomorrow would start the same way I woke up that morning, feeling unusually confident, which is always dangerous for someone like me. Not the I'm going to conquer the world type of confidence, but the quiet, sneaky kind that whispers, you got this, even though you have no idea what this is. I didn't announce to anyone, because announcing it would have been admitting I thought I could actually handle adulting. And adulting, for me, being handed a map in a language you don't speak, you think it's a good idea, but nothing will go according to plan. I started small, thinking one tiny success might carry me through the day. Making the bed seemed harmless enough. I've seen adults do it, and they make it look effortless. When I attempt it, it feels like folding a fitted sheet in zero gravity. I tugged and smoothed, stepped back, and waited. Waited for something. Applause, recognition, maybe a tiny flag that said, "Yes, you belong here." Nothing came. That's when I realized that confidence is often invisible to the universe. You can feel like a hero, but no one else notices. That small act of confidence made me bold enough to try the next thing. Grocery shopping. I had a list. I had shoes that didn't squeak. I even brought reusable bags to signal competence. I wandered the aisles like someone who knew exactly what they were doing, carefully avoiding eye contact with anyone who might see through me. And of course, everyone else in the store was calm, efficient, clearly in charge. Calm people are terrifying when you're not calm. They operate in a reality where nothing is overwhelming. While you're standing there trying to decide between two brands of cereal as if it's a moral dilemma. With each small success, my confidence grew, but that's when the danger started. Confidence makes you think you're ready for bigger challenges. When your brain is waving red flags, I decided to tackle a minor paperwork task, thinking, I've got this. I opened the form and immediately felt the gentle, mocking weight of complexity. The words were familiar individually, but made no sense together, and I nodded like I understood, while quietly panicking inside. My confidence hadn't disappeared. It had just upgraded to reckless optimism. The irony of overconfidence is that it feels just like real competence. There's no warning sign, no alert that says, you're about to fail spectacularly. It feels legitimate, which is why it's so effective in comedy. You, the audience, can see exactly how unprepared I am, and the speaker is blissfully unaware. My brain started rehearsing scenarios I wasn't prepared for, imagining interactions I hadn't yet had. That quiet confidence became a trap, because once you believe in it, you start stacking choices on top of choices, each one riskier than the last, all under the assumption that everything will work out. By mid-morning, I was operating under the illusion that I was thriving. Every minor accomplishment fed the narrative that I could, in fact, handle adulting. But the audience, of course, knows without confidence, without preparation, is a comedy waiting to happen. That's the hook. Every step, every small task, every nod to myself carries the tension of potential disaster, keeping viewers hooked and anticipating the moment everything unravels. After convincing myself that I could handle the day, I realized I needed to prove it through action. But proving responsibility isn't about tackling major life changes first. Responsible people, or at least the ones we pretend to be, start small. That's why I chose something deceptively simple, making breakfast. Cooking is not normally my skill set, but I thought, how hard could it be to fry an egg? Spoiler, very hard, apparently. I carefully placed the pan on the stove, measured out the oil like a chemist, and cracked the egg with the precision of someone defusing a bomb. The egg didn't break, but the yolk looked like it had survived a minor trauma. That, of course, made me feel heroic. Every small action suddenly became monumental. Pouring coffee wasn't just pouring coffee. It was a declaration of competence, proof of existence in the world of responsible adults. I measured, I timed, I stirred, and the coffee, like the egg, survived. Somehow, I stood back, took a sip, and felt a surge of pride, which quickly turned into anxiety, because pride in adulting always comes with a silent auditory responsibility. It doesn't congratulate you, it just waits. When it waits, it grows. I moved on organizing my living space. Again, small tasks felt monumental. A bookshelf wasn't just a bookshelf, it was a test of judgment and precision. Each item I placed had a right position, though the rightness was entirely subjective and invisible to anyone else. I adjusted things that weren't crooked, straightened things that didn't need straightening, and nodded to myself like I had just unlocked some hidden code of adulthood. That nod is important. It's subtle but signals self-approval, which is necessary when external validation is scarce. Even routine errands became arenas for comedy. Taking out the trash was no longer a chore. It was a strategic operation. Approach the garbage can like it was a high-stakes mission, ensuring every bag was secure, every lid properly closed, every route calculated for efficiency. I even paused midway to check my reflection, because appearance matters when you're pretending to be competent. Someone passing by might not have noticed, but my internal audience certainly did. As the day progressed, realized that completing these small tasks didn't relieve pressure. It multiplied it. Each accomplishment set a precedent. The universe, or at least my imagination, seemed to think, well, if you handled that successfully, surely the next task should be easier. It wasn't easier. In fact, it demanded more focus, more careful planning, more internal narration. I had unknowingly created a snowball effect where one small success piled invisible responsibility on top of the next. Even simple decisions like choosing a snack or responding to a text became exercises in deliberate thought. Approached every action as if it were an evaluation, a test I hadn't studied for. The humor lies in the exaggeration. These are mundane tasks, yet under the lens of attempted responsibility, they transform into epic challenges. That's the core of storytelling in this style. The mundane becomes monumental. The ordinary becomes hilarious. The audience can't help but watch to see which small, safe task will trigger the next moment of chaos. By mid-afternoon, I was exhausted not because of physical exertion, but because of mental intensity. Each tiny success required reflection, calculation, projection. Responsibility, in its quiet way, had become relentless. It didn't reward me with accolades, rewarded me by expecting more, quietly raising the bar while pretending nothing had changed. And that subtle, visible pressure is exactly what keeps viewers engaged, waiting to see how the next ordinary task will spiral into comedy. As the day unfolded, began to realize that the heart of attempt to be responsible wasn't actually performing the tasks themselves. It was the constant internal commentary that accompanied every single action. My mind became a director I didn't hire. Every movement, every choice, every step with an excessive level of scrutiny. Pouring coffee was no longer a simple motion, became a mental exercise in timing, angle, and temperature control. Each sip was reviewed for its flavor, temperature, the appropriateness of consuming it at that exact moment. My brain, which usually sleeps on the job, had clocked in for overtime. It wasn't accepting breaks. Walking across the room, I started to rehearse conversations I might never have, imagining scenarios that hadn't happened yet. Every interaction I had earlier replayed in my head with commentary I didn't invite. When I answered a question from the cashier or even nodded at a passing neighbor, my mind immediately analyzed tone, volume, and posture, cataloging mistakes that might have been completely invisible to anyone else. That's the insidious nature of internal monologue. It transforms the simplest interactions into a labyrinth of potential embarrassment. Even decisions that normally wouldn't matter gained enormous weight. Choosing a snack wasn't just picking something to eat, became a moral exercise in responsibility. Should I have chosen the healthier option? Did the other snack feel slighted by my choice? Would my future self judge me for this? Each trivial choice was now a potential story of failure waiting to be realized. That over-analysis is what creates tension and laughter simultaneously, because the audience can see the absurdity even as the protagonist is trapped inside it. The mental commentary also included imaginary audiences. I pictured people silently evaluating me, not harshly, just calmly, which somehow made it worse. Calm observation is terrifying because it suggests competence in others. Suddenly, my every move seemed inadequate by comparison. I adjusted posture, hand placement, and even breathing, trying to appear like I had the situation under control. That's the beauty of this type of storytelling. The audience is in on the joke, watching a character panic internally while appearing calm externally, which creates layers of humor. Moments of potential rest were invaded. Sitting down for a break didn't feel like relaxation. It became a strategic pause. Decision that had to be justified. Was I allowed to rest? Had I earned it? What would happen if I didn't follow the internal rules I had just made up? Responsibility had turned into a persistent shadow, quietly overseeing everything I did, reminding me that even stillness carried consequences. Every time I thought I had successfully navigated a small challenge, my brain would immediately introduce new what ifs. The victory was fleeting because the internal monologue doesn't stop, continuously invents new scenarios, new risks, and new angles of potential embarrassment. That constant loop of reflection and projection is what drives the tension in a comedy story like this. It's not about grand disasters, it's about the slow, creeping panic of overthinking ordinary life, which the audience finds both painfully relatable and hilariously entertaining. Even when I attempted to focus on one simple task, the internal narrator would pull me off track. It would replay previous choices, weigh the consequences of minor decisions, speculate about events yet to happen. The chaos is silent but relentless, which makes the comedy feel real. Each thought is a small hook, each pause an opportunity for laughter, and the audience stays glued, anticipating which trivial action will be transformed into the next absurd mental showdown. As the day progressed, I realized that responsibility wasn't just about what I did, it was about how I interacted with other people while trying to maintain the illusion of competence. The first interaction that truly tested me was surprisingly simple, a question from a neighbor asking if I had seen their package. Normally, I might shrug, nod, or mumble something non-committal. But in the context of my self-imposed responsible day, this became a high-stakes performance. I could feel the weight of expectation pressing down as if I were on trial for the competency of all adults everywhere. My mind raced through potential answers, each more convoluted than the last. I realized that the calmness of the other person was its own form of intimidation. Calm people are terrifying because they don't rush you. They wait, which is worse than yelling, because patience carries judgment silently, like a magnifying glass focused on every tiny flaw. Gave an answer that sounded confident enough to pass inspection, though internally I was second, guessing every word. Confidence in these moments is deceptive, it masks chaos. The person nodded politely, and that nod carried a quiet authority. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was the kind of acknowledgement that made me question whether I had done the right thing or simply performed well enough to temporarily satisfy observation. Began to notice that their calm demeanor was a trap of its own making. It didn't guide me, correct me, or instruct me. It simply existed, placing the responsibility squarely on me to navigate the interaction correctly. The next test arrived in the form of a brief conversation at the grocery store. A cashier asked if I found everything I needed. On paper, this is a mundane question, but when filtered through my newly heightened sense of responsibility, became a moment of intense scrutiny. My brain overanalyzed the phrasing, tone, and context. Everything mean literally everything, including the items I didn't pick? Was there an expectation for me to comment on quality or pricing? My response, a simple yes, thank you, felt like a gamble. The silence that followed the answer amplified my anxiety, because calm acceptance from someone else makes the stakes invisible but very real. Even as the day continued, I noticed how subtle interactions carried layers of responsibility. Walking past someone in the hallway, found myself calculating eye contact, gestures, and posture. Everything had meaning now. Every casual acknowledgement became a tiny test of social competence. I straightened slightly, adjusted my tone when speaking, even timed my responses like a rehearsal. The humor lies in the contrast between the perceived importance of these interactions and the reality are mundane moments that become monumental under the pressure of overthinking. The weight of responsibility escalated quietly, transforming simple social interactions into arenas for silent judgment. Each person I encountered was unknowingly part of a test I didn't fully understand. Their calmness, their efficiency, their polite demeanor only magnified the absurdity of my anxiety. That tension, the internal panic versus external composure, is what makes storytelling in this style compelling. The audience watches knowing the stakes are imaginary yet relatable, laughing at the overinflated significance of ordinary moments, while simultaneously anticipating the next interaction that will quietly threaten to unravel the carefully constructed performance. Even minor follow-ups, like someone asking for clarification about a purchase or a minor favor, became hurdles I had to navigate meticulously. Each conversation required mental rehearsals, imaginary outcomes, contingency plans. The ordinary transformed into a high-stakes labyrinth where calm authority figures acted as both guide and silent judge, keeping the tension alive, sustaining the comedy, ensuring viewers stay engaged, wondering how each interaction would tip the balance of my precarious, overanalyzed day. By midday, responsibility had shifted from being a simple concept to an invisible force pressing on me from all sides. Wasn't dramatic. There were no alarms, no urgent crises demanding attention. It was subtle, insidious, like gravity slowly increasing without you noticing until suddenly your legs feel heavier than usual. Every action I had completed earlier, every small success, seemed to have set expectations I wasn't prepared to meet. The more I did correctly, the more pressure accumulated. That's when I realized responsibility doesn't reward effort, it escalates it. Even mundane tasks, the kind that normally fade into background noise, became monumental. drinking water, adjusting the thermostat, answering a text. Each action carried weight. I approached everything cautiously, imagining invisible observers cataloging every decision. That's the part that's funny in hindsight, because none of it mattered externally, but internally, it felt like I was performing on a stage without a script. My mind provided commentary for every movement, rehearsed consequences for actions that hadn't occurred, highlighted failures I might make in the future. That kind of mental pressure is exhausting. The audience experiences it as a slow, creeping comedic tension that makes even small failures hilarious. Each minor accomplishment no longer brought relief. Instead, it multiplied expectations. Folding laundry correctly didn't mean I had conquered responsibility. It meant that the next task had to meet a higher standard. Completing a single chore without error created a subtle but relentless internal scoreboard. I began to feel accountable not just to myself, but to some unseen tribunal. That tribunal didn't exist in reality, but its presence was palpable. It was the perfect setup for comedy because viewers recognize the absurdity instantly. The joke isn't in failing. It's in taking ordinary success and turning it into an internal crisis. Even attempts at relaxation became complicated. Sitting down to rest felt strategic. Was I allowed to relax? Had I done enough to justify this break? My brain interpreted calm as an opportunity for hidden consequences to emerge, so I was never truly at ease. Every pause, every sip of coffee, every glance at a phone notification became an exercise in anticipation. What would this moment cost me later? The audience laughs because they understand that these stakes are imaginary, yet the protagonist treats them as real. That contrast is the heartbeat of this storytelling style. By mid-afternoon, mental fatigue had set in. The day wasn't physically strenuous, yet I felt weighed down by awareness. Each small task created a ripple effect of obligations. The momentum was relentless. It became clear that responsibility isn't a single event. It's a compounding phenomenon. It creeps into your decisions, your thoughts, and even your fleeting moments of peace. That slow accumulation is what makes the humor both relatable and engaging. The audience sees the escalation and anticipates the next comedic misstep, hooked by the tension between simple actions and inflated consequences. The subtle absurdity continued to build as I navigated minor errands and interactions. Responsibility didn't demand dramatic mistakes to be effective. It was effective precisely because it quietly magnified ordinary life into a series of exaggerated stakes. Each choice felt consequential, each small success a prelude to the next test. That invisible pressure, ever present and unrelenting, created a narrative tension that keeps viewers invested, laughing at the relatability of overthinking and the unpredictable comedy of to manage something as intangible and relentless as adult responsibility. As the day wore on, realized that the most unnerving part of attempting to be responsible wasn't the tasks I had already completed, but the ones that hadn't even arrived yet. Responsibility, I discovered, has a peculiar habit of planting seeds and walking away, leaving you to wonder when they'll sprout into problems. Nothing exploded. Nothing required immediate action. And that silence was worse than chaos because it left me guessing, imagining consequences that could strike at any unpredictable moment. The anticipation itself became exhausting, slow-burning comedic tension that kept every mundane action on edge. Even routine decisions felt charged with significance. Choosing what to eat, replying to a text, or deciding when to check email became exercises in cautious deliberation. My mind kept reminding me that any minor oversight could have repercussions. crafted elaborate scenarios where tiny mistakes snowballed into large-scale disasters. The humor in this is subtle but powerful because the audience immediately understands the absurdity. Ordinary choices transformed into high-stakes drama purely through perception. Each decision, no matter how trivial, carried invisible weight, and that weight kept building like a pressure cooker slowly approaching maximum. Every moment of perceived calm became suspicious. I found myself thinking that the universe was quietly observing, waiting for the exact time I would let my guard down. Sitting down to relax felt strategic. Even casual interactions were analyzed for potential future consequences. I imagined polite emails arriving days later, following up on my actions or inactions as if my life had a delayed feedback loop that ensured I never truly escaped responsibility. This layering of anticipation and anxiety is what keeps viewers hooked because they recognize the internal stakes while laughing at the disproportionate pressure applied to ordinary life. My minor successes were tainted with new responsibilities. Completing a simple chore didn't feel like an accomplishment. Instead, it was a setup for further obligation. Each task completed seemed to generate two more in its place, quietly multiplying the mental load. I realized that responsibility doesn't provide closure, it compounds, and the subtle comedy emerges from the audience's awareness of this inevitability. Watching someone navigate an invisible labyrinth of expectations that grows silently is both relatable and entertaining, particularly when delivered in a dry, storytelling style that mirrors Nate Bargatze's observational humor. The day progressed with constant mental anticipation. I imagined notifications, reminders, follow-ups that hadn't occurred yet but seemed inevitable. Even relaxing or celebrating small wins felt premature, as though the universe might interrupt at any second to remind me that nothing was settled. The comedy arises from the tension between perceived danger and mundane reality. Every small, responsible action is paired with an exaggerated mental consequence, making ordinary life feel like a suspenseful narrative. I started noticing how responsibility subtly reframes time. Moments stretch out as you calculate past, present, and future missteps. What once felt simple now carries multiple potential outcomes, each one demanding consideration. The audience stays engaged because they sense the slow, creeping escalation of stakes, anticipate which ordinary action will become the next source of internal panic. That anticipation, paired with dry, self-deprecating humor, is the essence of storytelling in this style. It keeps viewers laughing, empathetic, glued to the unfolding chaos of a day consumed by the invisible, relentless pressure of adult responsibility. So after all of that, I realized something important. Being responsible isn't glamorous, and it sure doesn't feel rewarding in the moment. You go through the day thinking, I can handle this, and by the end, you're just tired, mentally exhausted, emotionally drained, wondering if everyone else makes it look easier, or if they're secretly panicking too. Responsibility doesn't hand out trophies. It quietly observes, piles on, waits for the exact moment you relax to remind you that nothing is truly finished. By the time I sat down on the couch, coffee in hand, and the day behind me, I wasn't proud. I wasn't victorious. I had survived, yes. I had also been thoroughly tested by minor tasks, invisible pressure, internal commentary that made every small decision feel like a high-stakes gamble. That's what being an adult feels like. It's both terrifying and ridiculous at the same time. And yet, somehow, there's a strange satisfaction in realizing you survived the day without catastrophic failure. You made it through the mundane chaos, stumbled through small challenges, Learn that trying is sometimes more important and funnier than succeeding. Tomorrow. Well, tomorrow might be another day of pretending to have it all together. But for now, I can laugh at the mess, the overthinking, the invisible weight of responsibility that somehow makes life both absurd and entertaining.